Come on.
It says live. We're good to go.
God love Facebook. No, it's trying to post the links.
Oh.
Every single time.
Oh, we've actually got a title this episode.
We do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I figured we'd stick to Flat Earth and Chemtrails because we have the one and only Mick West.
Mick West.
Joining the program. And as soon as I get all these links posted, someday I'll have this all situated. And then it'll be like a real show. I'll be like a real boy.
No, we'll never be like a real show.
That'll never happen.
I can't even believe, and I'm going to be honest with you, I can't believe Mick West goes from Joe Rogan to the Fortean Slip.
It's a real downturn.
He's climbing the mountain to the top.
It's a pretty low bar. Just
it's all good.
Well, you can't go up from there.
We started our fascination with you, Mick, about it was I want to say about 2 years ago or so. We used to do a section of the show which we've stopped doing. We need to do something similar to it soon. We used to do a news portion where we would go over the relevant Fortean news stories, Bigfoot, UFOs, whatever. Steve would read the news, and we would make fun of him the entire time that he read the news and piss all over the stories because generally it's all a bag of shit.
Yeah.
The one reason why I started the show to begin with, oh great, the clock's chiming, was because that Steve and I, we started out in a becoming friends in a Bigfoot group. And what we had discovered over the course of our time was that at that point in time, we were like 99% of this shit is just garbage. It's not worth even looking at. It's usually a complete hoax, or it's somebody seeing something that's not there, pareidolia, whatever it may be. And that's why we decided to start the show. We were like, let's do a show where we just literally poke fun at the bullshit. So we were, going along doing this podcast. We're going through news stories, and Steve's reading this news story. I don't even remember what it was at this point, but he gets about three-quarters of the way through the story, and the story says, "Enter Mick West." And from that point on, like I just went with it. Like I was Mick West this and Mick West that, like, and then at the end of the show, I would say, "Somebody get me Mick West." That was how we would end the show.
Well, I'm very flattered. I was pointing this out to me before, but it's very interesting.
But now that we have you here, you run Debunk.
Yeah.
Correct?
That's right.
And if you could just give the people an overview of what your website is.
Well, Debunks is essentially a forum that is kind of dedicated to debunking conspiracy theories, for want of a better description. It grew out of my older site, which is Chemtrails Science, which isn't really active anymore, but I started that about 10 years ago because I was really interested in chemtrails, the chemtrail theory. And so I set up a site to basically look into that and examine the claims that people were making and seeing there's anything behind them, and see if I could help people out by explaining it to people. And that went on for a few years, and then I kind of branched out into debunking more stuff, and I set up the Debunk site. And that's it's a forum, so there's quite a few other people on there. Although it's I'm obviously the main poster on there, and I post a lot of the articles and stuff, and I run the whole thing. But there's a lot of other people there, and there's a lot of good discussion and investigation.
Cool. So when you were on Rogan's podcast, the one thing that you guys focused on quite a bit was the flat Earth theory and how absolutely ridiculous this theory is. And you brought up a ton of interesting points, like that you can literally check this with the satellites, the weather on the planet, and check the weather on the planet and know that these things are circling the Earth. It was just fascinating to me, and these people that believe in these theories just crack me up.
Yeah, I started out like kind of incredulous that anybody could actually believe it, and I thought that everybody who said they believed it was just trolling. They were just like posting crap just to, like, you know, mess with people. But eventually I came across people who obviously did actually believe it, which was kind of amazing to me. And then, you know, you start getting into discussions with these people and then trying to explain things to them, and it kind of sucks you in. It's, you know, if you're into explaining things and you like science and you like math and geometry, it's just this very compelling thing to try to explain to people, because it seems like you should be able to just point out a few things to people and then that would be it. But then I thought the same type of thing with the chemtrail theory. I thought I could just explain to people that contrails persist, and that would be it. But, you know, as I'm sure you know, that it doesn't really work that way. Even if you explain things to people, they don't just flip over and go, "Oh yeah, that's right." They continue with their beliefs for quite some time.
Yeah, we've dealt with the Bigfoot wooers quite a bit with that, where you could just tell them you're blue in the face that this stuff isn't even possible, what you're saying, and oh no, it happens.
It is possible because of quantum and Tesla, Chris. Get with the program.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
But it's not surprising to me, maybe, because it happens in all walks of life, and we've talked about it quite a few times on this show. When people want to believe something so badly, you know, they're just going to believe it no matter what. Now, you can throw any fact you want at them, you know, and they're going to believe the alternate fact because, you know, somebody said so.
Yeah,
and that's who they follow.
They refer to that as motivated reasoning. It's like people, they don't just simply believe things; they actually try to figure out reasons in their head why they should believe it. So if you show them something like with the flat Earth thing, you show them that you know, Polaris, the pole star, is at a certain angle that matches your latitude, and that can only work on a sphere. Then they'll try to figure out some way of explaining that with flat Earth math, and so they get into these increasingly convoluted explanations for things. You just layer upon layer of additional explanations that they need, when, you know, really all they need to do is drop everything and they can come back to the real world.
Before you know it, the world's a disc on the back of 4 elephants on a giant turtle.
Right.
Yeah. Which, the things that they believe aren't far off from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the simple idea of believing that the Earth is flat is so at odds with everything we know about the Earth that it's you know, you might as well be on the back of an elephant. And you just look at the explanations that they give for why ships drop below the horizon. There's like 3 different explanations they give for that. You know, one is that it's just perspective, and then there's like a variant on the perspective, which is a thing called the perspective matrix, where everything has a discrete vanishing point depending on how high it is, and when they get beyond that vanishing point, they kind of like dip below the horizon. But it's different for the sun and the moon, and the sun and the moon don't change size. So there's this huge, complicated, like, pile of nonsense, basically, that they have to create in order to explain what they're seeing, or they just deny what they're seeing. Like if you tell them the sun stays the same size throughout the entire day, which it, you know, quite verifiably does, they'll say that it doesn't, and they'll show you a YouTube video showing the sun looking like it's getting bigger because it's getting brighter because it's rising through the atmosphere.
Well, people have an amazing capacity for bullshit and rationalization of that bullshit.
Yeah, that's definitely what we see in the flat Earth community with people who've been in it for a while. I think like you got to give people who are kind of just getting into it a little bit of slack because they're just hearing these ideas for the first time, and because they haven't really looked into the evidence against the flat Earth theory. They're just kind of exposed to this exciting new world where all of a sudden they can question everything, and then there's this guy on YouTube who seems to have some interesting answers which go against what NASA is telling them, and so it's all kind of fun. So you can kind of see like people, you understand like people actually getting into it initially. The problem is when they stay in it for like months or years, like long after people have actually explained things to them. So how can people actually maintain that motivated reasoning for so long?
And it makes me wonder why we're not educating our people better. Like that is one of the biggest cure-alls for this problem.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but does that work?
Well, you need obviously a certain type of education. You can't just like tell them about like math and history and geology and geometry. You've actually got to teach them how to think about these things. Teach them how to evaluate evidence. Like actual critical thinking of evaluating claims is something that some people are being taught that in schools now, but I was never taught anything like that. I was just taught maths and arithmetic and maths and I don't know, English reading, writing, and arithmetic basically, and then a little bit of physics and stuff. So, and then I got into computers, and no one taught me anything about like figuring out if something is bullshit or not. That's something I had to figure out on my own. So now I feel like I've got pretty good at it, but like, can we teach that to kids in school? I think we probably can, and I think that's probably something that we should do, especially if you look at how much like fake news there is out there right now.
Oh God, it's a plethora of it right now, and according to our president, it's all fake news. So, I mean,
yeah. So we got to figure out how to get people to be able to evaluate whether something is fake news or not.
I have to say, even when it comes to non-Fortean and non-paranormal, non-flat Earth type things, even politics, non-politics, any kind of news. If somebody posts an article on Facebook, I mean, it's the gospel truth, and nobody even questions it, even though it's clearly not true.
Yeah.
And
people share things on Facebook if they want it to be true. Like I just saw like a real trivial thing today. I saw like a video someone posted on a conservative site that I'm on, and they claimed it was the Israeli army had this new weapon which destroyed Syrian tanks, and then they had this long description of how this weapon was destroying this tank, and they had a video which looked impressive, and this video had been shared like 20,000 times on Facebook. But I took like 30 seconds to look into it, and it turns out it was an old Swedish video from like the 1980s that was on the Discovery Channel, and it was showing like a Swedish weapons test. So it was something completely different. But because people liked the idea of this powerful Israeli army like killing Muslims, they shared it just because it appealed to what they like about the world or what they want the world to be.
Was zero investigation into whether it's the truth or not.
Yeah, it felt good, so they shared it.
Yeah.
I literally just got tagged into a post where someone was saying, this is a letter from someone in the UK after the terror attacks there. And in this long written thing, it was all about how, do you want Muslims raping your young daughters and all this stuff? And I'm like, just like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, for one, get me off that post. I don't want to be associated with this. It's clearly racism. And it's just this propaganda that gets spewed around the internet. And it's the same way with that as it is with the flat Earth stuff, as it is with chemtrails, Bigfoot, UFOs. I don't care what it is, but it's stuff like this that people do, this bullshit that makes me go, okay, this is why I don't believe the ancient alien theory. Because people had a capacity for bullshit back then too.
Mhm.
You know, when they're like, oh, they talked about all these fantastical things. Yeah, well, L. Ron Hubbard wrote some really good fucking books. Well, okay, they were all shit, but they were all fantastical.
It's our
But-
Darwinian advantage that separates us from other animals.
No, yeah, okay.
The ability to bullshit our way out of anything is a Darwinian advantage.
Maybe if you look at it that
That's
way.
just it's a function of language, essentially. It's like once language arises, it brings on this whole kind of layer of what is reality and what's true and what's not. Because people can describe things, whereas before they couldn't describe things. And so now
and then they
Right.
can
we have
create.
stories, and then you got what do you believe? What is knowledge? It all gets kind of complicated. But this is what we've got. We've got to deal with it. So.
Oh, we
Yeah.
have a flat earther in the chat room.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
who's our flat earther?
I'll give you one guess.
Ryan?
Yes. Congratulations.
No way.
No,
Come on, Ryan.
Well, here we'll go through a little thing for the dumbass in the chat room.
Ryan is a long
Mick,
listener.
you spoke about an experiment that you can do on a plane. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. What I was doing, well, I'm not probably you're talking about the one with the level.
Yes.
Where you use a level. Let me see if I still have that level. Oh, I've got it over here. 1 second. All right, so I've got this level. It's a very cheap level, and it's got like a plastic tube on top, which is just it's the tube from a pen, and you can look straight along the level. And if you look through the tube and you get the level so that this bubble is level, then you can use this tube on the top to sight the horizon. So if you're going up to like 35,000 feet where a plane normally flies, and then you look, if you can see the horizon, and if you look out through this tube and make sure you've got it level, which can be a bit tricky, you have to kind of look around the side, then you can see that this will actually be a couple of degrees above the horizon. It's going to be about 3 degrees above the horizon, which shows that the horizon is falling away from you. And this is something that's fairly difficult to do on a plane because the horizon isn't always very visible. But if you're over the ocean and you've got good lighting, then you probably can actually see it with this.
Yeah, as long as you get a nice clear day.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm going to say is like a slam dunk thing because it's quite hard to do, and it's actually a lot easier to do if you're lower down. If you just at an altitude of like about 1,000 feet or so, the horizon becomes fairly clear, and then you can use something like this, or you can use a much longer level, something like a 3 foot or a 4 foot long level, or a 1 meter level, and look along the top of that. You can level it and stick it on a tripod or something and get it actually level. And then if you get some distance behind it, you can line yourself up with the top of the level, and you'll see that it is in fact above the horizon. The horizon does drop away from you at even if you're just like 500 to 1,000 feet. It is actually actually measurable.
With simple dollar store items, you can debunk the whole theory. I mean, that's funny to me.
Debunk a claim. You can debunk one claim. Like they make this claim, the horizon always rises to eye level.
Right.
They're not entirely sure what that means. They don't really explain it very well. But if you actually check it with what I assume eye level means, like you're looking along a line which is level, then you find that the horizon doesn't actually rise to eye level. So you can actually debunk that one claim that they make.
That claim, right?
Then they will fill that with some different thing, and then they'll say, "Oh, well, that's just because of perspective or water in the atmosphere or something." They'll make up some reason. But I haven't debunked the flat Earth, but I have debunked the claim that the horizon always rises to eye level.
Now, are there any other little experiments that people can do?
Yeah, my favorite one is looking at the size of the sun. And this is something that is really easy to do. What I use is one of these solar viewers, which is just It's an eclipse flip viewer. Now, there's going to be zillions of these on the market because there's going to be a major eclipse in North America in August. So there's like literally millions of these for sale right now for like, you know, $1 each or so. And you can take one of these and you just look through it. You look at the sun and you see how big the sun is at noon, and then you look through it as the sun sets and you see how big the sun is at sunset, and you'll see that they're the same. They are the same size. Now, if they're the same size, that means that the sun can't be orbiting above us, because if it was just orbiting like 3,000 feet above us, then when it got further away, it would get smaller. Because that's perspective. Things get further away, they get smaller. So,
but the sun's position is never changing.
Yeah, the sun's size is never changing. So that means that its relative distance from us doesn't really change throughout the day. It stays basically the same all day long. From morning through noon to night, it's exactly the same. So that means, based on the laws of perspective, which are really simple, you know, things get smaller as they get further away, the relative change in its distance is very small, which means it must be really, really far away, many, many times further away than, literally hundreds of times further away than the size of the Earth. Now, we know from modern science that it's 93 million miles away, but from this observation, we can tell that it's thousands, it's probably several millions of miles away at least, just from, you know, basic principles. The fact that it goes across the entire surface of the Earth. We know the Earth is thousands of miles in size, no matter what shape it is. So if the sun is moving across the entire surface of the Earth and doesn't change in size, that means that the relative distance is not changing, which means that it must be many times further away than the size of the Earth, which means it must be millions of miles away, which means, if you continue that chain of logic, that it can't be orbiting over a flat plane. It must be going around a ball, because if it was just going around a little flat plane, if this was the Earth and the sun was going around above the Earth and it's millions of miles away, you know, it has to be like way over here, and it can't do that and still be shining down on the Earth here. The only way it works is if the Earth is very far away from the sun and the Earth is spinning around. That's the only way it can possibly work.
Right.
Of course, all that's a little complicated and it's difficult to visualize. So it's very easy for people to dismiss what I just explained because it's kind of hard to visualize. It's very hard to understand the scale of the universe, like the sun and the Earth.
But that's the problem, really Mick, is that you're a rational human being.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like...
It's a challenge. The challenge is, how do you explain these things to people? And, you know, I've managed to explain things to some people. I mean, the best way of explaining things is to be able to show them something. Like I can show them at least that the sun doesn't change size. I can show them that happens, and I can give them a really easy way of duplicating it. And you know, a lot of flat Earth people, they have this camera, the Nikon P900. It's like the holy grail of flat Earth photography, because it's got this really, really long zoom lens, and so they can use this to look at things that are far away and examine them if they go behind the curve of the Earth or not. But you can also use it with one of these. You just hold this in front of it. You can use one of these to take photographs of the sun throughout the day, and you can take these really, really high resolution photographs of the sun and see exactly that it doesn't change shape and it doesn't change size. And from that, and then I've got to try to explain to them what that actually means. And I gave you the explanation there with a bunch of hand waving, but you know, how do I actually convey that to people? It's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, because we generally just call them dumbasses, which doesn't solve the problem. I'll completely admit that.
You know what would solve the problem?
Oh no!
Go ahead.
Concentration camps.
Oh, come on, Richard.
I think that would shift the problem. I would shift the problem elsewhere.
Well,
you know, concentration camps is something that I've actually been debunking for a while.
I didn't pay that much attention in school. I was too busy trying to get into girls' underwear. But I vaguely remember this whole flat Earth shit being put to bed in the 1400s.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
well, it
that.
goes back even further than that. It was put to bed back in the like 500 BC or earlier. In the
Right.
1400s, you're probably referring to Columbus
Yeah.
traveling around the world, but they already knew at that time that the Earth was a sphere, and he was just trying to sail around the Earth.
He was just trying to find a
So
quicker way to what? To India?
Yeah,
Yeah.
to maybe to the Indies, which were the Indonesia, places like that, Malaysia. But
Right.
basically, that was
So-
there was trade routes like overland, which took a long time. You know, the Silk Road and all that. So they wanted to find out a new route by going the other way. But they actually the error that they made was that they miscalculated the size of the Earth, and they thought it would take them a lot less time to get around. And instead, they discovered North America.
Right.
So the big myth is that Columbus and all them believed that the Earth was flat, which they really didn't.
That's nonsense. I mean, that nothing. They knew that it was round.
Not Columbus.
They didn't know exactly how big it was, but
Right.
they
Right.
knew that it was round. And there was actually much more accurate estimates of the size of the Earth back then. He just happened to pick the wrong one and use the wrong one in his calculations. But they figured it out pretty quick after they got to America.
So I think, in my opinion, one of the quicker ways to debunk this flat Earth theory is to stand next to a large body of water, because water is always going to find the plane, you know. So I live right on Lake Erie, and there's a 100-foot bluff that sits above the lake. So I'm actually elevated above the water level. And on the other side of the lake, I'm not sure if you're aware, but is Canada. And I, for the last couple of years since we've been talking about flat Earth on this show, have tried my damnedest to see Canada from this 100-foot bluff, and I cannot. And so, in my opinion, now that pretty much does it for me. I mean, it's only 26 miles across from where I'm at. I should be able to see something over there on a nice clear day.
Oh, 26 miles, you probably would be able to see something, actually. I'm surprised you can't see anything at 26 miles.
Well, on the other side of the lake is, if I look directly across, there's a park over there. It's like a forested area, so I wouldn't be able to see buildings and things. But
right, yeah, the
you
classic,
can
classic
anything.
examples of looking across lakes are looking at Toronto, across from Lake Niagara, and looking at, or is it Chicago from the other side of the lake? And there you're looking at very tall buildings, and you can see them poking over the horizon. And it depends on the atmospheric conditions. Sometimes you can see more, sometimes you can see less. But yeah, you do need something tall. So if you're 26 miles away from flat land, you're not going to see anything.
Right, but if the theory is correct, you should be able to see something.
Oh yeah, yeah. If the world was flat. But then, of course, then they get into their explanations about the perspective matrix and how light kind of bends, which doesn't really make any sense, and you can't really create any kind of mathematical model of what they're doing there. But yes, if you simply go by regular physics and the regular optics, you know, light travels in a straight line between the objects in your eye, then it's blatantly obvious that the Earth is round. So they have to come up with these explanations of perspective, which don't actually relate to real perspective at all. They're just like based on the rules that artists use for drawing things. And then they try to warp this around by applying it twice. They say there's this perspective. If you look at things sideways, there's still perspective, but there isn't really. But so they just kind of they mess things around until they get an explanation that sounds good to them. And because things like that, like geometry, are actually quite complicated and difficult to understand if you're not familiar with them, then they just go with it because the words sound good, so it must be correct.
Right.
Now, have you ever come across anyone in your own life that is a flat earther?
Well, no.
I'm not asking you to out anybody. I'm just asking if you've come across them, you know, like in your personal life.
I've come across people that believe in chemtrails. My dad was a member of the Flat Earth Society, but it was the satirical Flat Earth Society, which was based in Canada, which was basically a like 1970s group that was set up to basically to troll people, but they didn't use the term back then, into not taking what scientists say at face value. So he was a member of that. He didn't believe in a flat Earth. He was a sensible chap.
He believed in poking fun at the flat Earth.
I remember as a child back in the 70s, he would he mentioned that he was in the Flat Earth Society, and I thought it was kind of strange, but that's what it was. It was a satirical organization, and a lot of people actually don't realize that this. I think it's the International Flat Earth Society. In the 70s was a satirical organization. It wasn't a real organization, but the guy who ran it, I don't remember his name, was deeply into it, and he acted very seriously. But it was all ironic, and it was all basically him trying to get people to think, to question their reality, and basically question the role of science in society. It's like, should we trust scientists to do things like genetically modify crops or whatever? Not that they were doing that in the 70s, but nuclear bombs, things like that. So that's kind of like the basis of that society. And you can, like I said earlier, it's understandable that someone might find that aspect of it interesting. Like, think for yourself, question everything. That's a kind of a good thing to do in a way, so long as you don't just completely question everything. Like, is this a dream? Like, are we living in the Matrix? Like, nothing is real. Is this an apple?
Oh, but I love those ones.
Yeah,
those are the best questions, Mick. Come on, those are like, those are like 5 bong hits in, you take a bag of mushrooms and you're like, oh, wait a minute, where am I?
There's an example I give with that type of thing, which is the robot cat example. It's like, I could claim that my neighbor's cat is a robot, and I could give all this evidence that my neighbor's cat is a robot. Like, it's always like sitting on the tree, and it's always staring at me, and I never see it eating or taking a dump. And it kind of moves in a weird way, and it does these weird jumps that I don't think a cat should be able to do. And it kind of smells a bit funny, and it doesn't really like me, and it acts kind of strange. So you can keep on like giving these examples of why I think my neighbor's cat is a robot. But because there's no way of testing it other than catching my neighbor's cat and cutting it open, then I might as well be just making shit up. I might as well be just saying, like, everything is a dream, like we're living in a matrix. It's the same type of thing. If it's something that's not testable, if it's something that produces no actual results that you can actually like look into, then what's the point of even bringing it up? Like, are we living in a matrix? Who cares if you can't like do anything about it?
Right. Have you heard about the experiments that they're doing right now to test if the universe is a hologram?
Yeah. I mean, essentially what's going on, and I talked about this on the Joe Rogan show, is that scientists are trying to figure out what the fundamental laws of the universe are. Like, trying to figure out if the universe is a hologram doesn't really make any sense, because it's, if the universe is something that's like a hologram, it's something so far above our level of understanding that it doesn't really mean anything. Like, what a hologram is. It's a little 3-dimensional image that's created by the interference of light and stuff. But saying that the universe is a hologram doesn't make any sense. But they're trying to figure out if maybe it's got like some kind of discrete quantum states or something which indicate that it's kind of digital. There's a lot of weird stuff in science, but what the scientists are really doing is just trying to figure out what the laws of nature are. Now, maybe if they do it long enough, they'll figure out that we're living in a simulation, but we're still bound by the laws of nature. It's not like we can just like pull back the curtain and say, "Ha, we figured it out. We're in a simulation." If we're in a simulation, then the thing that's simulating us is going to be just way more complicated than we're used to. So,
well, I mean, the whole idea is that if you look at it in that aspect, like, technically we're creating these virtual reality simulated things, and that eventually we'll get it to a point where it will be exactly like what we see as reality at some point. So that's where they make that stretch that we could be a simulation that was created by whatever came before us, I guess.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of I don't know if it's really a relevant point. Like, if we are, then so what? If I don't think we could simulate our current universe given the universe we're in. There's like a fundamental problem with the amount of information in the universe cannot contain a copy of itself. It can contain something less complicated than itself, but it can't contain something that's as complicated as itself. Because then you're doubling the amount of information in something which only contains one set of information. It's just physically impossible. So if we were to simulate something, then what we are simulating is going to be less complicated than the entire universe. Now, we might be able to simulate like something that to the actual individual seems real, but it's not going to have the full richness of the universe. It's not going to have simulated like supernovas creating stars and like the entire other galaxies with other alien races living in them. It's going to be a much, much smaller thing because you can't simply shoehorn an entire universe into a small part of something and have it be as complicated as the thing that contains it. So we could create a simulated reality that seems real for the people who are in it, but it's not going to be as complicated as this. And that means that the next step up the ladder, the thing that's actually simulating us, if that exists, is going to be way more complicated than the current universe. And you know, the current universe is pretty damn complicated. There's
it's amazingly vast.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I look up at the sky and I just go, yeah, no. I get a headache sometimes just looking around at it because it just goes on for what we could perceive as forever.
Yeah,
you know,
that's how it seems. So I guess there could be a situation where they're only simulating the solar system and everything else is like a big projection on the screen. You know, these things are like
the planetarium.
Yeah, the theoretical like thought experiments that it could be, but it's the same thing as like my robot cat example. It's completely meaningless to me. My neighbor's cat, it looks like a cat. I'm assuming it is a cat. Since I'm not going to go and catch it and kill it and dissect it, then I'm just going to continue to believe that it's a cat. And the universe looks like it's really big. It looks like there's loads of other galaxies. It looks like there's other stars. It looks like there's planets, and there's no reason to suggest that it isn't. So I'm just going to go with the simplest explanation that, you know, what we see is what we get. Until
now, do you buy into alien life?
Well, I think it's quite probable that there's some alien life out there. I don't know how much intelligent alien life there is in this galaxy, but I think it's inevitable that there's some intelligent life somewhere in the universe other than us. You know, there's all these things. There's the Drake equation is this equation where you multiply these 7 numbers together and it comes out with a probability of there being alien life, and the probability depends on what you pick the numbers to be. Like it could be that it could be like we happen to be the first intelligent life that arose in the universe. It's possible because we don't know like anything at all about the nature of the universe in terms of how many there are and like, you know, what happens. Like in every universe, there's going to be one life that happens first. We could be it. It's unlikely because, you know, we're like a 2nd or 3rd generation star, and the universe has been around for a long time. So if life is fairly common, it probably did arise before us in other places. But, you know, who knows?
Who was it that said that there's 2 possibilities in the world? One that alien life exists, and the other that alien life doesn't exist, and both are equally as horrendous. It was Arthur C. Clarke or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't remember who said that, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of options within alien life existing that I wouldn't classify as horrendous. I mean, if there's a bunch of slugs living on Saturn, that's just pretty interesting. That's alien life, and you know, some slugs arose from evolution on Saturn. And if there's a bunch of sea turtles living on some nearby planet, that's also really interesting. And if there's some primitive races living on other planets, that's pretty interesting too. Where it gets a little sketchy is when we get the more intelligent races than us who might do things to us.
I think that if you look at our own planet, for example, you know, Earth, there's organisms that live in, you know, some extreme areas. So I think the possibility of life outside of this planet is probably more likely than not likely, because life wants to exist. I mean, it just does, you know, and it'll exist in some really extreme situations, like boiling hot water next to lava and shit like that. So I think, I think the possibility is more of a probability than a possibility. So.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you there, but it's very
far.
hard to figure out how probable it is because there's a whole bunch of factors.
Right.
When you got to look at, like, one of the factors is asteroids colliding with planets, and you need a certain configuration of solar system to allow asteroids not to collide with your planet for long enough for life to arise on it. Like, if you've got if a typical solar system has asteroids colliding with the planet every 5 million years, like destroying all life on it, then life's never going to arise. And we've got an interesting solar system because we've got this giant planet Jupiter out in the outer solar system, which kind of acts like a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking up all the asteroids that might fly in from outside the solar system. So we've got this kind of protective shield of Jupiter whizzing around, mopping up all the asteroids, which makes it much less likely for asteroids to hit Earth. So the question then becomes, like, how often do you get a situation like that where you've got this protective planet and then these other planets within the Goldilocks zone, as they say? So there's a whole bunch of variables. It's just really hard to say. I think it's likely that there's life out there, but I don't know how much there is.
Now, have you ever seen that movie, The Europa Report?
No, I don't think so.
Where they send it's a manned mission to Europa to check for life underneath the ice because they figure there's water on the moons. Are those the moons of Jupiter?
Saturn. Euphorus.
Saturn.
Oh, it's Jupiter. Sorry.
It is Jupiter.
Yeah, no.
Well, either or, it's a big planet.
I think,
but it's one of the moons there, and it's a pretty decent little movie anyway. But it goes into that whole idea of there being life in one of these circumstances, on these planets. Of course, it goes a little,
crazy,
movie-esque, but not so much towards what probably we will find, which will be, smaller organisms or whatnot. But I just think it's fascinating that, people would believe that there could be nothing out there when there's literally just a vast a number we can't even comprehend of planets and stars and galaxies. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think in a way, it's an interesting academic question. But for most people, their interest is in have aliens visited planet Earth, and that's where you get into what should be more concrete evidence about it. Like, if they visited Earth, there would be like traces in history, and people claim that there's all these rock carvings and things and cities that people claim couldn't be made without alien technology. And then obviously there's all the UFO stuff as well. There's lots of people claiming that they've seen UFOs, and there's photos of things that look like UFOs. So I think for most people, the probability of alien life on other planets is largely just a boring academic question, and they really care about, are there actually aliens in the secret bases underneath Area 51?
Visiting Earth, controlling the reptilians.
There are 57 varieties of aliens.
The reptiles.
They have everything.
Yeah, it's a much more interesting story for people. Yeah, for me, the interesting thing is getting off the planet and space travel and setting up colonies on other planets and eventually going to other stars. Because I don't think there are aliens visiting us on Earth, but that's all boring long-term stuff, and people are more interested in speculating about UFOs and alien abductions.
People want to believe in the fantastical.
Yeah,
nobody cares about less important things like the survival of our species or what to do about overcrowdedness. They want to know about alien abductions and stuff.
Yeah. It would be great if we could get them interested in that type of stuff. Elon Musk is really into getting off the planet and setting up a base on Mars and one on the moon and stuff like that.
When is he going to come out with his Iron Man suit? Like, I'm waiting for. He should just change his name to Tony Stark.
Well, he probably would if he could do the Iron Man suit. I've seen Iron Man suits that kind of work like that. They've actually got the thrusters in the arms. Of course, they only last for 15 seconds or so. But could happen.
If anyone can figure it out, Elon Musk can. I'm just waiting for all the cars to be self-driving,
Yeah, that's good. That would be a good thing.
The end of DUIs. The only thing that I don't like about the idea of
wait. You're waiting for the end of DUIs, so that's why you want self-driving cars. You just want to get.
I think that's a great reason. That's a great reason.
You'd still get in trouble if you were in a vehicle while it was driving itself.
Yeah, we have to get self-driving cars and change the law that allows us to have the cars drive us to the pub and back.
Right. But the problem that I have with the self-driving cars is that they're going to put a lot of truckers out of business.
Yeah.
Out of work. It's going to destroy, that employment opportunity in America. I think they already implemented it down in Australia. They're already doing it.
Yeah, I think they have trials in a few countries. But yeah, like truck driving is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, employment demographics in North America. There's a vast amount of trucking going on and parcel delivery and things like that. And yeah, it is going to be a major change. So like you got to ask like.
But at the same time, it's technology just marching forward.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Like yeah, it kind of reminds me of the coal mining thing. Like Donald Trump wants to get people back in. Get coal back so that we can have coal jobs, but there's really not that many coal miners left in America, and it's not the huge industry than it used to be. And really, a better use of money would be training people to do other things.
Getting people into the alternative energy sources.
But I think like we really got to think, or the government, someone's really got to think about what do we do if we are going to transition from regular drivers to self-driving trucks.
But I imagine they'd still need people in the trucks in case it broke down or something. I mean, it's not.
Eventually, they were.
System.
No, but what they need to do is they need to train those people to either work on those vehicles when they need to come in for maintenance or what, because they're gonna need people to do all kinds of different things on them. Or to somehow shift that labor, because that will just destroy a whole portion of the American economy. As far as the worker goes, the employment opportunities will be gone. But it's happened in almost every style of production for a really long time.
Yeah, well, there might be bigger problems coming down the line, which just the general taking over of everything by robots. Like it's not going to be very long before AI is going to be essentially more intelligent than you and me, and it's going to be able to do what you and I are doing right now, probably better
and a lot faster.
Doing it right now, and a hell of a lot faster. They're able to do it like just because once you've got an AI that's as intelligent or as fast as a human, you just got to turn up the dial. Add an extra bunch of computers and it becomes twice as fast or 10 times as fast. And you've got this super intelligent robot. And it sounds like science fiction. It sounds like the Terminator, but it is something that's going to happen. There will be intelligent robots at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
The transition into that would take a lot of years though. I mean, I just left a job where I was working on equipment, from the 1950s and 60s. So, I mean, not everybody's going to use robots just because they're there. I mean, it's going to take a long time to transition into that sort of thing.
Well, think about like call centers. Like when you call a call center now, like it takes you to somewhere in India or something. Those are slowly already being replaced by robots. You got these really crappy systems right now where, you have to say something to a robot, like, tell me what your problem is. And then it doesn't understand what you're saying. But that's going to get better. That's in 10 years' time. That will be pretty much seamless. Like I don't know if you've seen things like the Amazon Dot, the Amazon Alexa thing, where you tell it to do things.
Alexa's the shit.
Yeah, and they're starting to bring out chatbots that work with Alexa, and you can actually hold a conversation with these chatbots over Alexa. And they're using this to train the chatbots at Amazon so they get more and more intelligent. So they've released all these chatbots to millions of people. They're going to start talking to people, and they're going to get better and better at pretending to be people, basically, and understanding what people are saying. So I think it might happen a bit quicker than people think, because there's going to be this shift. As soon as they get to a certain level where it's intelligent enough to pass as human and do certain human tasks, then it's like I said, it's just a question of ramping up the dial.
I think I'm talking more in the manufacturing arenas, because there's a lot of companies out there, and I've worked for a lot of them myself, over the years, where to transition from the current equipment to new equipment that's compatible with your artificial intelligence technology is huge money. It's a money thing.
Yeah. So labor,
and even just
an important thing.
Even the machine that I was working on at my last job, it was from the 60s, but to buy that same machine today is like $200,000-$300,000, and a lot of small companies obviously wouldn't be able to do it. Now your big companies, obviously, Ford, for example, it would be easy for them, but your normal everyday company, I mean, it's going to take a long time, I think, to transition
into that. It's going to come
stuff.
down to cost, really. Like if you look at Amazon's warehouses, they use robots for moving things around and picking things off shelf that are a certain size, but then still have to use humans for collecting things that are like irregular size.
I think it's robots who pack Amazon boxes. You ever get an order from Amazon fulfilled by Amazon?
Oh yeah.
And you get this little tiny thing in this giant box. I think they need to teach the robots a little bit
one
better.
corner with all this bubble wrap in there around it, not near it. Yeah.
It's all coming.
It is. The robots are coming. Yeah.
Now, we're coming to the end of the show, but before we wrap everything up, I would like to touch on chemtrails with you. And the reason that I would like to touch on chemtrails with you is because we used to have a friend. And when I say we used to have a friend, we no longer have these friends anymore because they went far
off the deep end.
I mean, basically, they went totally into the woo of everything. Well, one of the things that they went pretty crazy about was chemtrails. And it caused a huge problem with us because we're rational thinking people. So I'd just like to get, your overview of the whole chemtrail problem, or the problem with that idea.
I think people who believe in chemtrails tend to be people who have gone down the rabbit hole, like you say. Like they don't just believe in chemtrails. If you've got someone who believes in chemtrails, then they're also going to believe that the 9/11 towers were all destroyed by controlled demolition. And they're going to believe that the government is putting fluoride in the water to control us, and they're going to believe that the government is run by the Illuminati or Jewish bankers. The belief in chemtrails...
Whoa. The 9/11 thing, I'm totally with you, but the Illuminati is very real. All right.
Well, we could discuss the details of that, but my point is that people have a range of beliefs. Like, and if someone, I view conspiracy theory as kind of like this spectrum, and at one end you've got reasonable conspiracy theories like the JFK conspiracy theory, or like the America hastening the Pearl Harbor, something like that, being something to try to get America into the war, so they ignored warnings. Like those are simple, straightforward conspiracy theories. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got we're living in the Matrix, like Nelson Mandela died in prison. Everything is an illusion type thing. And then in the middle, you've got things that are somewhat reasonable, somewhat crazy, like 9/11. Various parts of that can be quite reasonable. And chemtrails, you could even say there's a case that there might be a reasonable version of the chemtrail theory. Maybe the government is performing some tests or something like that.
But there is historical evidence for the US government drugging inhabitants of the country, the MK Ultra thing, which turned out to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, conspiracies do happen, and people do go beyond the law, and they do take things into their own hands. And the government sometimes does things that, like now, we would think would be a bad idea. Like there were tests done of spraying bacteria out of planes to see how far the bacteria would go, and they would release bacteria in the subways, and it was stuff that back then they thought it was just a harmless tracer bacteria, and later, like, they figured maybe one or two people like were more likely to get the flu or something because of this bacteria, so it wouldn't be approved now with current standards, and people wouldn't like being sprayed with bacteria anyway. But people do things, and this just leads people to have a tendency to believe that they're going to do worse things. Like if you hear that someone, like there's the Tuskegee syphilis experiment where doctors gave people syphilis without telling them as an experiment to see what happened. And if things like that happen, who knows what else might happen. But that's basically the problem, though. People just say, oh, well, I think it probably is the type of thing that the government does. So they're predisposed to believe it. And so they accept every single thing that comes along in terms of evidence. So like with the chemtrails, if someone tells them that contrails shouldn't persist, like normal contrails only last 30 seconds, so if you see something that lasts more than 30 seconds, it must be a chemtrail, they're just going to accept that because it fits their idea of this being this strange government conspiracy that's probably happening.
I'd like to clarify that I don't actually believe in chemtrails. I was just mentioning the MK Ultra thing.
Right.
I don't want you thinking I'm stupid.
No, I didn't think that. But
He does believe in fairies.
Yes, there are things that there are conspiracies. People in power conspire to do things, and you can point to lots of actual examples, and you can point to lots of fairly probable examples. But you got to say, what is there actually evidence for? And
see, I think that people are kind of right to have a strong look at the 9/11 stuff, and I'm not talking about the stuff where the day that it happened. I think that the stuff that was done that was shitty and shady was following what happened that day. Was our government using that to go into Iraq and to go into Afghanistan, and just, I mean, we've been pretty much kind of perpetually at war.
Totally, and there were other things that happened to justify the invasion of Iraq, like the chemical weapons stuff, like Colin Powell standing up in the United Nations and giving his evidence, which later turned out to be like the weakest pile of crap ever, and not really evidence at all. It's quite arguable that that was a conspiracy by the Bush administration to get us into Iraq by boosting this really crap evidence. Like they have some pictures of a truck, which they say was a biological weapons lab, and
it looked like a dodgy truck, to be fair.
Yeah, but they claimed certain things, and then they drew these diagrams, and to people who wanted it to be true, then it seemed like reasonable evidence. But the government lies, and people in power lie, and we've got to be vigilant. But if we're falling for theories which are wrong, like the chemtrail theory, or the more extreme versions of the 9/11 theories, like saying that the explosives were planted in the buildings and the planes were flown by remote control, that type of nonsense, that's just distracting from the real issues. That's distracting from what's actually going on in the country, like the real problems with corruption and the military-industrial complex, and the fact that we're spending all this money on wars that no one really wants and that isn't really helping us.
Maybe that's the real conspiracy. Maybe that's why they allow this stuff to go on, so that we are distracted from the actual conspiracies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's deliberate, but I think that's definitely the effect that all this distraction has. People are just concerned about nonsense without really looking at the real problems in America. And, in America, we've got a huge problem with the prison population. We have the biggest prison population in the world. We've got 3 million people in prison in America. It's just ridiculous. And real problems like that, if you're believing like chemtrails and the flat Earth conspiracy, you're not going to try to lobby a politician to change sentencing guidelines because you feel like you've got bigger fish to fry. Because people aren't focusing on the real issues.
Backs my theory up of establishing concentration camps for these people, so we can get rid of them.
Oh my God.
And make, you know,
why do you have to constantly bring it down to the lowest common denominator?
It's my thing, man.
That's
Richard.
I'm a troll.
Yeah, that you are.
Part of the problem.
But there's nothing that you can tell people when it comes to chemtrails. I mean, it's just like you just gotta be like, well,
you can though. I mean, there is a lot of things like, because they do essentially base their beliefs on, you know, they want it to be true, but they also feel like there's this big pile of evidence that they have. You know, you go to a site like geoengineeringwatch.org and you see this huge list of evidence that we've got. And you can actually have success with people by just providing the antidote to that, like all the evidence against that evidence. Like they say, like, you know, contrails can't persist. You give them these old books. They say that, you know, high bypass jet engines don't make contrails. You say, yes, they can. And here's all these science papers that explain it. And then, you know, why are planes flying over my house? You're living under this route. So you can actually go through and show them all this evidence. Now, a lot of the times it seems like it's having no effect. And sometimes it seems like it's making it worse. But a lot of the times it will eventually turn them around, because they see that every single bit of evidence that they thought was backing their theory is actually false. And there is actually something that explains it, and it does actually work with a lot of people.
Cool.
I think you're right. Because like Chris and I'm not sure so much about Richard. Nobody knows anything about Richard, but Chris and I, you know, I started out, you know, believing a lot of, let's say, the Bigfoot theories and the UFO theories and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But with education and somebody like you, or, you know, somebody who really knew what they were talking about, you know, it turned me around for a lot of that stuff. So, I mean, sometimes education does work, you know, real education, and not but the problem I think is these people are so skilled at what they're trying to pass off. I mean, they're so good at what they do. I mean, I think it's a lot of the UFO guys, like, you know, all they have to do is have PhD behind their name, like Stanton Friedman, for example, you know, and people just buy it because of that. Yeah. You know, and I'm not saying Stanton Friedman's, you know, anything other than a UFO guy, but I'm just saying, just because he has a PhD behind his name, you know, people will buy it. And that happens in every,
every conspiracy. There are scientists who have some very strange ideas about my 9/11. There's like one guy who's a scientist. I don't know what degrees he has, but he believes there were nuclear bombs like underneath the World Trade Center that caused them to collapse. Then there's a scientist guy who, in the chemtrail world, who's convinced that it's just planes spraying coal fly ash, which is the leftover from coal power stations, the dust. And he has these nonsensical theories, but, you know, people give him credence, and he's actually got papers published in these pay-to-play journals. You know, people believe in credentials, which is a bit of a problem.
Well, we have in the Bigfoot community that we were all part of for a while. We have somebody who created their own journal just to you know, Dr. Melba Ketchum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I mean, she claimed that Bigfoot was human or angel or who knows what she was saying, but she created her own journal. And because some of us were out there debunking things at the time, you know, we found that, and so, but then she claimed some other crazy theories and stuff. But she's a doctor, so people to this day still buy into her theories of what Bigfoot really is, you know, when she has no evidence. And she's been debunked many times, you know, it was bear or just common animal and stuff, but people think in fact, she turns out to be a veterinarian, but whatever, you know. So just because she has doctor in front of her name, people will buy into it, you know.
In her case, it was collect 20 cereal box tokens and become a doctor, though.
Pretty much, yeah.
There's not very many,
but it doesn't matter how.
Who believe in the flat Earth theory, though. I think that's one of the things where even the pseudoscientists really haven't got into that, as far as I know.
Because it's nonsense. We know the Earth isn't flat. We get pictures of it. You can look on any weather satellite or anything, and you can see the Earth is round. You can see the moon is round from Earth. It's utter crap. Why people believe it, I will never, ever know.
Yep.
Did you take your medication this evening, Richard?
No, sorry. We're running late.
Yeah, I know. But there's one more thing I'd like to ask of you, Mick. If you could take up the personal crusade to debunk Dr. Johnson's Bigfoot portal bullshit, we would greatly appreciate it.
I would be
There's no debunking needed. It debunks itself.
Yeah, I must admit I don't really know very much about the Bigfoot theories.
You're lucky. You're one of the lucky.
There's a gentleman in the Pacific Northwest who believes that Bigfoot comes through portals and becomes trees.
No, they become symbiotic with trees.
Oh, yes.
Or they're beings of light that symbiotically merge with trees.
Yeah.
Yes. And he saved their race from extinction.
That whole esoteric kind of part of conspiracy theories is something I just kind of stay away from. Like, people think that angels are eating, like, sylphs, these sky spirits are eating chemtrails, or that there's some kind of etheric warfare going on in the sky. So we should use orgonite to destroy chemtrails. There's a whole bunch of essentially magic type stuff going on, which I just don't really deal with it.
You try to stay away from that.
I don't think I get very much traction when dealing with magic.
Yeah,
I stick with science.
You're obviously a super intelligent human being, Mick. The laws of thermodynamics, they're like built in, right? We didn't invent those; they come with the universe. Yeah.
We essentially, yes. That's how the universe appears to work. That entropy always increases in a closed system.
Right, and if you built something that it would have to follow those rules, right?
Well, it has done so far. We haven't found anything that doesn't. So it certainly seems like that should happen. Like, if you think of Newton's laws of motion, everything follows those pretty much. But it'd be great if we discovered an exception to the rule. But as far as we know, and as far as science knows, those are hard and fast rules, which have not been ever broken in the history of the universe, to our knowledge.
There we go. That
except by except by some doctor out in the middle of the woods in Oregon.
And your website is just metabunk.com?
Metabunk.org.com will work too, but .org.
Both will get you to the same place?
I changed it to, well, I said it was .org because when I did Contrail Science, people thought that the .com at the end was proof that I was a commercial endeavor and I was making money from it, and therefore I must be a government shill. .org, just save time with that one cropping up again with Metabunk.
We have a really small show here. I mean, we get, what, 1,200, 1,500 views on a show or something like that. But people sometimes accuse us of being government shills. It's crazy.
We've got the most people ever watching this show right now, though.
Well, it's because Mick West is on.
Yeah.
That's right.
We got Mick West.
Yes, so somebody did get me Mick West. This has been episode 154 of the Fortean Slip. If you like this shit, hit the little thumbs up button. If you don't, hit the little thumbs down button. Leave a comment, subscribe. And people, remember, you can't just go and comment as the video is processing, those of you who are listening now.
Bill.
Yeah. Check out Matt Knapp at youtube.com/bigfootcrossroads. Check out Richard's blog. The link is below the show on YouTube. Do not check out Steve's eBay page. Do go check out...
I wouldn't tell you what it is anyhow.
Metabunk.org and or .com. And as always, check out Dred Funn, the silent partner to the Fortean Slip. If you people don't go and check out Dred Funn's artwork, just stop listening to the show. I don't even give a shit if there's 0 people listening to this show next week. Just if you can't. What?
Speaking of artwork, also go and check out Bigfooting with Keith and Colin, an awesome cartoon strip.
You plugger. How come you didn't plug your stupid bullshit the whole show this time?
Well,
because Mick West was on.
Yeah, you told me that I had to behave.
He was being respectful. But check out Dred Funn at dredfunn.com and youtube.com/Dred Funn. We will be back next week without Mick West. See ya.